Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening. We've got a lot to get to on the podcast as we recap two new commitments for SMU football, as well as one for SMU basketball, all of them out of the transfer portal. So let's jump right in here and let's lead off with basketball for a change because Rob Lanier and his staff are reuniting with a familiar face from the transfer portal in Ja'Heim Hudson from Georgia State. He'll have 2 years of eligibility remaining. He committed to the Mustangs last week, and that gives SMU a second big man in the transfer portal class for this offseason. He joins Tyreek Smith from Oklahoma State. And with Ja'Heim Hudson, you get somebody who has been a big defensive force for Georgia State. He broke out as a freshman playing for Rob Lanier in 27 games with 12 starts, averaged 5 points and 4.6 rebounds per game in 2021, 2022. But then he followed that up in 2022, 2023, this past season, by leading the team with 6.9 rebounds per game, as well as adding 10.1 points per game. He led the team in block shots and finished third with 27 steals, starting 21 of 28 games he played in. And this is a guy that stands 6'7", so you get some added size to the front court, maybe a guy that you could even stick out there on the perimeter a little bit as well. What I like about him, too, and I think this is an underrated piece about Ja'Heim Hudson, and he's somebody that didn't really have an incredible high major list of programs after him, but had a ton of mid-major programs after him, but SMU got him on campus pretty quickly and got him on board, is that he won back-to-back state championships in high school. And I think as Rob Lanier kind of rebuilds this culture, and it's been a little bit of a change from what the culture was previously, kind of lax, kind of chill, country club vibe, like we've talked about, is you got to infuse some winners into the program. And I think that's something he did here with Ja'Heim Hudson. Obviously, he comes from Georgia State, which had a good run at the end under Rob Lanier. He was a part of that team that went to the NCAA tournament and played Gonzaga in the first round, making that run in their conference tournament to even make the tournament. And now after playing out a year under the new staff, he decides to make a change and move on for his final 2 years of eligibility. That gives SMU 4 transfer commitments in this offseason. They also have Denver Anglin and Chuck Harris, the 2 transfer guards, to join Tyreek Smith and Ja'Heim Hudson. So SMU basketball continuing to kind of chip away at this transfer portal market and adding players into the mix. Now, here's the thing about the transfer portal with basketball is I think it runs another day as we're recording this. I think it goes till May 11th. So we've even seen guys that have entered the portal, and we've seen SMU start to pick up the pace recruiting them. I dropped a note at ontheponyexpress.com about a new target that is emerging for SMU fans to know, so be sure to check that out. $30 gets you 6 months of access to On the Pony Express, so check that out on the website. Look, there's going to be somebody that SMU brings in, I think, at the point guard position. We've talked about Jaden Reed, who's a guy in the 2023 class who's still unsigned that SMU hosted this week for an official visit, or is hosting, I suppose, right now for an official visit. He's one of the top unsigned point guards in the country. He's somebody that you can build around for the future, but I do think they go after a point guard out of the transfer portal. And so that was what my note was about on the website. So if you're not a subscriber to ontheponyexpress.com, check that out. Worthwhile note there on a former 4-star prospect in the transfer portal that SMU is going after. So with that, SMU basketball adds another transfer that gives them 4. They're pretty close here to rounding out this roster. I'm interested to see how it goes the rest of the way, but I got to give the staff kind of credit for kind of hanging in there as the transfer portal continues to give new players into it, like their latest target. They also just offered 2023 big man Mitchell Holmes, who's from the Fort Worth area and is still uncommitted in this 2023 class. But I was checking my notes, and this is somebody they've been watching for a long, long time. He's just on the cusp of being a top 150 overall prospect in the country. He's stacked up some offers from programs like Auburn, Stanford, Texas State. And this is where SMU is making a late move. They're hoping that he can visit. Auburn is now going to be a program to know. He is somebody that is going to probably check out Auburn. SMU's battling the Tigers for that one now. He told On3. So be sure to stay tuned for the latest on Mitchell Holmes. I'm catching up with him later today as we record this, but a 6'11", 200-pounder could play 4 of the 5 in the front court for SMU. And I think when we've talked about what they need to add in the front court, the final piece was a kind of developmental big man in the sense that you have Xavier Foster coming back, and now that he's been around the program for a year, you feel like he's going to take that next step. You have Mo and Jai coming back. You have Keon Ambrose Hilton. You've added Tyreek Smith. You have these players that make a lot of sense that they have to take their next step forward when it comes to producing at a high level for SMU. And now you've got to add that future piece. And I think that's where you look at a Mitchell Holmes as being that guy. When you're battling a program like Auburn, obviously you have a lot of things to overcome. You have Bruce Pearl. You have the program they've built into a complete powerhouse across the country. But on the bright side, it is SMU and Auburn. That says a lot about the way SMU has at least recruited Mitchell Holmes, that he hasn't just gone out and committed to Auburn. He can very well do that. He's going to visit Auburn. He's going to visit SMU. And he can just kind of enroll at his next program as an unsigned senior. So he's a number 170 overall prospect in the country for the On3 industry ranking, a guy that is coming off an incredibly efficient April and May run on the Nike EYBL. He's actually one of the most efficient players across the entire circuit on the Nike EYBL, which is the best circuit out there. So that is something that you've got to like about Mitchell Holmes. And so now SMU and Auburn locked in a recruiting battle for Mitchell Holmes, a 2023 big man from Arlington. Before we jump into the football side of things, I've got to tell you guys about our friends at Dank Vodka. Dank Vodka, the best and only terpene-based vodka out there on the market. You can find it at Specs, Total Wine, and you can also get it on Drizzly. Our friend Trey Feist, U.S. Army veteran and former bartender who wanted to shake things up on the vodka front, has done just that with this smooth-tasting, terpene-based vodka. You've got to check it out. I told you guys you can meet with Trey as he makes his run through Total Wines across the area. As we're recording this, it's May 10th. He's out at Total Wine Las Colinas right now doing that tasting. Tomorrow, he goes to Total Wine at Preston Road in 121 on May 11th from 11 to 2. And then he goes to Goody Goody in Highland Village, I should say, over the course of the day as well. And then next week, he picks things back up on May 16th at Total Wine at Park Lane, 2 to 8 p.m. And then Total Wine in Euless on May 17th from 2 to 8 p.m. And then Total Wine on Alliance Boulevard in Fort Worth all day. So he is all over the place. Be sure to check it out. Dank Vodka. It's a premium vodka for Total Wine. So they've put that stamp of approval on it. And we really appreciate what Trey has brought with his partnership with On the Pony Express and the podcast. So check out Dank Vodka. Go meet Trey. Try it. You'll enjoy it. I promise. Jumping into the football side of things now, SMU did land a pair of commitments, and I want to start with the first one that isn't going to take too long, but Isaac Pearson, a transfer from Texas, a punter who comes to SMU this fall. He will be put on scholarship in spring 2024. He is the second Pro Kick Australia product to join the program. Pro Kick Australia helped Ryan Bachevsky head to college and play for Texas before he transferred to SMU. He's obviously SMU's starting punter next year. Pearson played 2 years with the Longhorns. He has one punt for 15 yards. This is a guy that once Ryan Buchevsky graduates, he can then be put firmly in the battle to be the starting punter. And if they are telling him he's going to get a scholarship next year in 2024, you've got to like his chances to be that starting punter. So one punt, 15 yards is what it is. It's not a great stat line when you look at it on paper, but there's a lot more that goes into scouting these punters, and they have their own tapes and they have their own websites. Like I mentioned, Pro Kick Australia, and there wouldn't be really many people that would have been over the moon about Ryan Buchevsky coming into SMU, and he worked out just fine. So Isaac Pearson comes into the program and joins it this fall, and then will be put on scholarship in spring 2024. But the big news, I should say, that came right as the weekend was hitting was Colorado transfer defensive back Keyshon Mills jumping on board while he was on his official visit to SMU. He spent one season with the Buffaloes. He's from Little Elm, Texas. He redshirted, didn't play, didn't record any statistics for Colorado this past year. But I mentioned for a while on this podcast that SMU was looking for another defensive back to join the program, and Keyshon Mills is the latest to join the program. So he is now in the transfer portal class that continues to grow. It's not done by any means. To give you guys a rundown on Keyshon Mills, he was a number 81 overall corner in the country and number 129 overall prospect in Texas. Had offers from Liberty, Kansas, obviously Colorado, where he signed with, and others. But I will say his 86 rating 4-on-3 is a fairly strong rating for a guy who's pretty under the radar overall with his offers. So I think you've got to look at this one as somebody that has size and length, which SMU covets in their defensive backs. They wanted another developmental kind of prospect to bring in at the cornerback position. And he's a guy that was recruited heavily by Ricky Hunley and Scott Simons while they were at Liberty. So there's familiarity here. So they bring in Keyshon Mills and add him to this impressive transfer class for SMU. And now you can look back on him and say, okay, he didn't play as a member of Colorado. It was a train wreck this past season, which on one point you can point to it and say that's red flag. It was an awful team. Why didn't he see the field? On the other side of things, you never know what's going on when things are a train wreck. And that is, quite frankly, I think why SMU was giving him a serious look. As a senior at Little Elm, he had 4 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, 3 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble. A very productive senior season for the nearby program that gave SMU Brandon Crosley as well. I like this take. I think he's somebody that you've got to sit there and say, okay, low expectations. I mean, when you sit there and look at the rest of this transfer portal class, there are guys that aren't going to get as much buzz. I mean, I think if Romello Brinson wasn't a former 4-star prospect, people would have probably been like, could he do it? Hasn't really produced much at all over the course of a multi-year college career. On the flip side, you have somebody like Keyshon Mills, who's super under the radar as a recruit, and you've just got to sit back and say, okay, I've got to trust that SMU knows what they're doing when you take a guy like this, because I tried to dig up track stuff. It doesn't mean he's not fast, but I couldn't find anything, so I don't have that. Like I said about Jalen Davis Robinson, he had that elite 100-meter time. You don't necessarily have that when it comes to Keyshon Mills. But what you do have, Ricky Hunley came into SMU and put a full court press on A.J. Davis, a guy who was pretty heavily offered coming out of high school, out of Dallas Skyline. By the end of his recruitment, not that many programs were really necessarily in the mix for him. They kind of backed off a little bit, but he kept saying, you know what, this is a guy that I'm going to go after. I know him. I like him. I like his toughness. And he's trying to crack the 2 deep right now. Or I should say he has cracked the 2 deep, and he's trying to crack the starting lineup. Will he do that this year with Chris Megginson and Charles Woods? It's going to be tough to do. But at least you now know your next in line is A.J. Davis, probably, for SMU at cornerback. So, and that's because of a really nice evaluation by Ricky Hunley. So I think in this case, you want to wait and see. He has all 4 years of eligibility remaining, which is a huge plus. and he's got size, he's got length. So SMU wasted no time once he went into the portal and got him on campus for the official visit, and he kicked things off over the course of the weekend with that piece of news. SMU did host other transfers. One of them we dropped on the board. So if you want to know who was on campus, you can check that out at ontheponyexpress.com. A pair of other transfer portal visitors, and they also had 2024 offensive lineman Kobe Branham was on campus for an official visit, and we'll have his full reaction to how it went on the site as well. Arkansas, who's the in-state program for him, Oklahoma State are battling it out for his commitment. And he's somebody that SMU is battling the big boys for. They're battling an in-state program in Arkansas. They're battling Oklahoma State, which has had him on campus a bunch of times. Texas A&M and Ole Miss are right in the mix as well. So SMU did host Kobe Branham, a big country boy on the offensive line for an official visit, 6'6", 320. But he really liked what he saw from SMU's spring practices and opted to go ahead and schedule an official visit. And so we'll have full reaction to Kobe Branham's visit at ontheponyexpress.com. Another prospect did lock in his official visit to SMU, and that is Gabriel Relaford, the big defensive lineman, I would say now, out of Shreveport. He's a guy that SMU hosted for a spring game visit, and he was on campus. You see SMU sitting with the on-3 RPM lead for Gabriel Relaford, who checks in around 6'3", 255 or so. I think he's going to be a true defensive lineman when it comes down to it. We've talked a lot about him, but he announced that he's going to be taking his SMU official visit June 16th. He's also checking out Vanderbilt on June 2nd for an official visit, and just picked up an Ole Miss and a Tulsa offer. So things are starting to get hot for Gabriel Relaford. And I feel like he's somebody that has a chance to sneak into 4-star status. That's how much I like Gabriel Relaford as I continue to dive into him. One more official visitor note, Graham Utter, who is an SMU legacy out of the state of Alabama, is going to take an SMU official visit. He hasn't locked in a date. Can't wait for his official visit. UAB and Troy have offered him as well. And I've mentioned him before as somebody who, when you look at his testing, you go back to somebody like Evan Brown, who has now made a career in the NFL, was very kind of lightly recruited out of South Lake Carroll, but ended up being a star at center for SMU, handling Ed Oliver very well. Everybody kind of remembers that about him. Graham Utter's testing is very, very similar in that regard. So SMU might have found a diamond in the rough, a guy with connections to the program. And who knows, maybe they end up swiping him out of the state of Alabama. SMU's been dishing out plenty of new offers on the recruiting trail, and I want to run down a large group of them on the back half of this podcast. But first, I've got to tell you guys about our friends at Smoke Provisions. The contest for a free Boulevard is ending next week. So be sure to go to ontheponyexpress.com, subscribe if you haven't already, and start stacking up entries to this contest. It runs through next week. It's going to be a fully catered barbecue tailgate on the Boulevard at the home game of your choosing by Shay Dow and his crew. It's unbelievable food. You can check it out. Check out more pictures on their Instagram at Smoke Provisions. But they did us a huge solid running this contest. So be sure to enter this contest. It is literally a free Boulevard tailgate, barbecue catered for 30 of your friends. Doesn't get much better than that. So check them out, Smoke Provisions, and join that contest today. The details are at ontheponyexpress.com. Finally, we're going to jump in now to some of the new offers. SMU going out onto the recruiting trail and continuing to offer 2024 prospects. They also went out and offered some of the state's best and, quite honestly, national players around the country, really, this past week. And I want to start off with one who's from Louisiana. I've known a long time, Melvin Hills out of Lafayette Christian Academy. He's one of the top, I should say, well-known players in Louisiana. He's been on the radar since his freshman year. He ended up tearing his ACL his sophomore year, kind of been bouncing back ever since. Texas is the heavy on 3 RPM leader in this one. He's got an official visit lined up to Texas and Ole Miss, but he's somebody that SMU went down to South Louisiana and offered, and now he is firmly on the radar in this 2024 recruiting class as SMU looks to address the defensive line once again. And we have his full reaction to the offer up at ontheponyexpress.com. He's somebody that I think you're still wanting to see more and more explosiveness out of since he's had that torn ACL. But he's got a ton of offers on the table. He's got the size. It'll be interesting to see if SMU can get him on campus, get an official visit, and then start pushing. He'd like to make a decision before his senior season. LCA is one of those programs that just churns out state championships in Louisiana. And right down the road from Melvin Hills is 5-star defensive lineman Dominic McKinley. I'm only going to mention him because, well, he's the number 1 player in Louisiana. He's a top 15 overall prospect on 3. SMU went ahead and offered him as well. And then they went up north to Arkansas to dish out an offer to Wyatt Simmons, who's really just burst onto the scene in a big way. He is out of Harding Academy, and you won't see this too often, but the Harding Academy, the Harding University Bison leading the way over some FBS programs there on 3 RPM. But that is, the hometown school. But Auburn is now offered. UAB is offered. Arkansas State. But SMU also dipped in there and offered him as well. He's somebody that is really starting to explode. He's another one now. As Scott Simons looks for linebackers, you've got to see if SMU can secure a visit and see if you can make some waves, get him on board before those Razorbacks come in and offer him, because I am sure they're evaluating him as well. We dip back into the Lone Star State with a program that was one of the first that I ever went to and covered prospects. But down there in Conroe, Texas, is a safety that is really starting to emerge as one to know in South Texas and throughout the state, and that's Devondre McGee. SMU offered him 6'2", 180. He's kind of a basketball player, but is now really emerging as a bona fide football prospect. Ole Miss and SMU are his 2 biggest offers now. Sam Houston and Houston Christian have offered him as well. He's squarely on the radar for SMU, and I think he's somebody that I like the offer. I like his upside. And as Ricky Hunley and Kyle Cooper continue to kind of go through the evaluation process with a lot of these players, and we've talked about the safety in the cornerback room, especially with how many players they're recruiting. We talk about the Chris Wacomas, the Ashton Williams, the just so many different safeties, David Kabongos, that they have on their board. Well, they offered Devondre McGee, who's still a relatively raw prospect, but doesn't shy away from contact. I got a chance to watch his film. He knows kind of how to play with physicality. And then from there, he's just trying to put the rest of it together as he continues to kind of really emerge as a bona fide football prospect. So he's somebody that with half a month to go in the evaluation process, SMU can certainly get out there, try to get him on campus. It's early enough in his recruitment. So that was another offer to go out at the safety position as SMU continues to look to address that group. They continued in South Texas at Bay City, where they offered 2024 defensive lineman Carlin Jones, somebody who is going to be one of those guys to kind of watch late in the process. 6'4", 260, and the number 60th defensive lineman in the country on the on-3 industry ranking. Texas Tech leads the on-3 RPM for him as well, but SMU's now jumped into the boat. He has Power 5 offers from Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Minnesota, Nebraska. He continues to stack up some offers here. So SMU now in the mix with him. as Calvin Thibodeau really went through what ended up being kind of a South Louisiana, South Texas run there on the recruiting trail this week, offering Carlin Jones, a guy who I think has nice size to him. I think our resident defensive line expert, Ojai Pony, on the board compared him to Devere Levelston. I like that comp as well with his long arms. But so SMU jumping in on Carlin Jones, who I think has a chance to rise up the recruiting ranks a little bit. I move into the 2025 class because SMU went out and while they were down in Houston, offered Kobe Sellers, a guy who ranks as a top 200 overall prospect in Texas, top 20 cornerback nationally. They went ahead and offered him. He goes to the same high school as Anthony Williams, who's another prospect at Shadow Creek that SMU offered earlier this spring. And I feel like when you look at what that Shadow Creek team has, you got to love what he brings to the table. So I really like Kobe Sellers, a really highly touted prospect. We'll see if SMU can get into the mix there. But that was another big offer that went out in the 2025 class. They also went out and offered Joseph Smith, another 2025 defensive back out of the Houston area. He's somebody that, as you could see there on the On3 industry comparison, that ESPN already has as a top 300 overall prospect in the 2025 class. And I think some of his offers at the end of this spring are going to reflect that. And certainly somebody that is really, really highly thought of in that Houston area as he continues to kind of go through the recruiting process early on. And then finally, the last one I wanted to highlight was another four-star prospect, and that is Devin Sanchez out of Houston North Shore, a really highly touted prospect. SMU jumped into the mix here. He's a top 10 prospect nationally, number one corner in the country. But SMU's now offered Devin Sanchez, who is teammates with Levante Johnson, CE King defensive back, who transferred to Houston North Shore. So now has offers out to two teammates. They aren't in the same class, but Devin Sanchez, a 2025 four-star defensive back, the number one cornerback in the country on the On3 industry ranking for next cycle. They have an offer out to him as well as his teammate Levante Johnson, who they've hosted for a visit. So with that, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the podcast. We will have plenty more on our mailbag edition of the podcast. And I am waiting for some breaking news on the basketball front as well. So if you listen to this far, be sure to head over to ontheponyexpress.com and we'll fill you in on that news. So that is all. A teaser for you guys. $30 to subscribe. You get 6 months of On the Pony Express. Check out the contest as well for a free Boulevard tailgate. And be sure to drink some Dank Vodka. Check it out. Smooth, terpene-based vodka, friends of the show. And we hope you guys have a great rest of the week. We will catch you guys on Thursday with a massive mailbag podcast. And hopefully that helps you get through the weekend. So appreciate you guys listening to this edition of the podcast, and we'll catch you next time.